I really hate drywall. Alright, so if you've been following along, we're ready to drywall. Got insulation in, we got the spray foam in, we did the dry lock on the floors and all the walls behind the insulation, the insulated board there. Everything is sealed up and ready to go, and we're ready to put our drywall on. So I'm just using standard 1/2 inch drywall. I've used some scrap pieces that I've had laying around. I put some on already. This was a piece that I had left over from the tiny room renovation, so I used that in here. So just kind of piecing together what I have. I bought some new drywall here. I'm ready to go. And so I'll take you guys along for the process of how I am doing the drywall here. So a lot of times when I do these projects, people ask, why don't you go into further detail about the drywall? But to be honest with you, drywall is one of the things I just dislike, and I'm not very good at it. So for all you pro drywallers out, I always give this disclaimer. You can go ahead and give me tips if you want, that's fine. But this is probably not going to look like a pro job. You know, it just is the way it is. So, but I will take you guys through with the methods that I've used and what I've learned from the limited experience I've had. I've drywalled a few rooms, you know, over the years, and done different projects like that where I've had to do drywall. It's turned out pretty decent. You know, I've had pretty good luck with what I've done, but it's definitely not professional level. So I will give that disclaimer and before we move forward here. So the easiest way to cut drywall is just to score it and then break it. So I've just put a piece of drywall underneath this to keep it up off the ground just a little bit. I've got my measurement here of 27 inches, and we'll get this positioned at both ends here. So that's right at 27. Score it. It'll break on its own as you lift it up. And then once it separates, you can just stick your blade in and cut that back piece of paper. And you have a pretty decent cut. All right, so we'll get this piece set in place here. So the screws that I'm using here are 1 5/8". I always use coarse thread. I honestly don't understand the fine thread drywall screws. They don't really bite into the wood and they don't hold the drywall. And so coarse threads, in my opinion, is the way to go. I don't really know what the fine thread, what the point of those are. So coarse thread, 2 5/8 inch is the length, which is pretty good length for a 1/2 inch drywall to get into studs. I would never, ever recommend using nails of any sort for any reason. There's never a reason to use nails. It's not going to save you that much money, especially on ceiling drywall and stuff like that. Every house I've ever been in, they use nails on drywall. They all are popping out. So do yourself a favor, use a screw. All right, so when you put the screws in, obviously you want to make sure you're going into a stud. So you want to screw the screw in just below the surface. You don't want to bust through the paper completely. You want to kind of pull the paper in just about 1/16 of an inch. You want that screw head to be just below the paper surface, so you can come by with some drywall mud later on and smooth that right over. You'll never see it. So right there is just about perfect. You can just barely feel the divot there. Your home improvement stores are going to sell these nice metal corner pieces that'll fit right on here. This metal edge will usually show through your mud, and that's all right. That's going to get painted, and it's going to look real crisp there on the edges. So you always want to use these whenever you have an outside corner that you're joining together. And if you look at drywall, they all come with a beveled edge. So the edge right here in this last like 1/2 inch is just a little bit thinner. So this is a 1/2 inch piece of drywall, but it's probably like 3/8 of an inch right here at the tip. And that's so that when you put another piece up against it, you've got about an inch of space here where it's a little bit lower, so that when you tape and mud this joint, for instance right here, when you tape and mud this joint, you're going to build this up about 1/8 of an inch when you tape and mud and feather it out this way. And so it just helps your seams be seamless. You won't see that seam, and you won't have to build up your mud and feather it out quite as far because of that little kind of indentation where they meet. So you need to keep that in mind. So for instance here, I'm going to put a piece on the top and it's going to butt up against this one. I want to make sure I don't use a cut edge. I want to use the factory edge to butt up against this factory edge. Now I don't care about the edge at the top. For instance right here, the edge that's going to be underneath the metal corner because it's going to be covered by the metal corner. So I don't care about this edge, but I do care which edge I use for the bottom part here. All right, so we're getting ready to do our mudding, and there's a few things that you are going to need to do that. So whenever you're doing drywall seams, you're going to want to get some drywall tape. This is good for your flat seams as well as your corners. It has a crease in the middle there that'll help you fit that right into any corners. So I've already gotten started here, and I have a few different tools that I use. I picked up this tray. It's a 14-inch mudding tray. It's a stainless steel tray. This thing has been, they're not that expensive, and it's just something you need to get, especially if you're doing any quantity of drywall mudding. You want to get something like this. You're going to throw your mud in here. If you need to wet it down a little bit, which I'll talk about later, you can do that, mix it in this tray, and then you'll need a couple drywall knives. This is a 6-inch, and then I also have an 8-inch and a 12-inch knife. Generally, I don't use the 8-inch, to be honest with you. I generally start with the smaller 6-inch, and then I go right up to the larger 12-inch to do my final taping. So this is extremely handy to have. You don't have to have a corner tool, but this is something I definitely recommend. It really makes the corners look good, and I'll show you how to use this here in just a few minutes as well. And of course you're going to need some drywall compound. I prefer to buy the pre-mix stuff. It's comes in 4.5 gallon buckets here. Joint compound, or drywall mud as it's commonly referred to. But I really prefer this stuff over the powder. You don't have to deal with mixing. You don't have to deal with mixing what you need and then throwing out the rest and all that stuff. This stuff stores really well. This lid seals on, so even if you open it and use it, you can seal it back up and store it. I've even stored this stuff up to a year and open this up and use it just fine. So I definitely would recommend going with the pre-mixed, even though it may cost you a couple extra bucks. It's totally worth it. All right, so we're getting ready to do one of our seams here. We've got 2 seams that cross in this particular case, but either way, it's going to be the same process. We're going to use a mud and tape to cover the seam. So whenever you're working with the drywall compound, joint compound here, you usually want to keep the mud on the edge of your knife, and so you'll kind of manipulate it around in the pan here and get a good little scoop just like that. And then you're just going to take it over here, and you want to force it in to the gap and just drag it down. So we're just going to get a little line of mud there. All right, and now we have some sheetrock or drywall tape. This does have a crease in it, so you can fold it into corners. It doesn't, as far as I know, it doesn't really matter which way you put this on the wall, but it does seem to fold out that way, so I usually roll it right down the wall just like that. So we're going to start right at the top here, and just keep the center line right with the crease in your joint there, and roll all the way down to the bottom and tear it off. Now I like to go back and just put a little bit of mud on top of it, just to kind of make it so my knife will slide easier. Then you want to start about 12 inches down from the top of your tape. If you start too far up towards the top of your tape, you're going to pull the tape down. So we'll start down here and press pretty firmly. We're going to squeegee this right down and make sure it's nice and flush. So generally for the first coat here, I just want to make sure that the tape is covered and stuck down nice and firmly. Once this dries, I'll just quickly kind of sand it over, make sure it's smooth, and then we're going to use our larger 12 or 14 inch knife to really feather this out. So we want the highest part here in the middle of the tape, and then it's going to feather out maybe 6 inches on each side, and then you'll get a nice transition. You'll never see the seam once it's painted at all. So but this is good for our first coat. Just got everything kind of sealed up and got the tape stuck on there, and so I'll show you how we're doing the edges here. All right, so we've got our edge bead on here, metal bead. So what this does is this creates a real high point right on the corner, and so if you could see underneath this, there's a big gap from the tip of this corner down to my drywall. There's a good almost a 1/4 inch gap underneath here, and so we need to feather that out and fill that with mud. Applying the mud to this is pretty easy. We just want to start to fill in that gap, and it doesn't have to be perfect, because you're going to come back and you're going to sand this all out anyway. So that looks pretty good for this this coat. I'll show you what we're doing in the corners. All right, so for our corners here, we're just going to start to force some mud into the gap. So we're going to take our tape here, and I like to kind of get it started. Go right to the top here and just kind of gently guide it into that corner. And just get a little bit on the top of everything here. And now here's where our corner tool comes in handy. This is gonna, the tip of this right here is where you want all the pressure. This will automatically feather it out. But all we're trying to do here is just make sure we've got a nice perfect corner going right down the wall here. So we're gonna start about 12 inches away from the very top, just so we don't pull the tape down. And I'm going to use my finger here to push into that corner pretty hard, and we're going to smooth that tape right down all the way to the bottom. And now there's lots of different ways to feather this out, but again, for this step, we're mainly just trying to get this tape kind of laid down in here. So I'm just going to go like this. I'm not going to run it down vertically. I'm just going to kind of horizontally scrape off my mud and feather it out just a little bit this way. And that's pretty much it for this step. We got the tape stuck in there, and we feathered that out just a little bit. So a real thin coat, and we'll come back and sand that, and that'll be nice and smooth. So the last thing we need to really deal with here is the screws. Just grab a little bit of mud on your knife, push it in, and kind of lightly scrape it by, and you're done. You don't want to scrape it real hard like that and just leave a dot, because that drywall compound is going to shrink. It'll shrink up just a little bit, or it'll expand just a little bit, and you end up with either a little bump there or a little divot there, and then you can't do anything about that. So you want to kind of leave a bump on top of it, kind of build it up around it, and then you're going to come back with your sandpaper and just touch the edges of that real quick. About 3 seconds of sanding and that screw is done, and you'll never see that once you get it painted. So once everything has dried here, I've given it a good 24 hours or even longer. I like to use these sanding screens. These things just last a long time, and I don't even put them on these are made for those applicator deals with the handle on it. But I just use it on my hand, and I can feel what's my hand. I can feel the high spots and the low spots, and so I can kind of press with my fingers or my palm in different areas as I sand to apply more pressure to a higher spot or a lower spot. All right, so we've got everything sanded down here. Sanded this down almost right to the tape, so very little mud on top of here. So we're gonna go ahead and remud over this. And I'm using a 12-inch knife, so this is gonna help us feather out from the center of our tape line out about 6 to 8 inches. So and that is pretty close right there. Looks like I went a little bit thin here, so we'll go back and touch this up a little bit, but that's the basic idea. I've got it feathered out, a total of about 12 inches, a little bit more than that, so about 6 inches on each side of the tape. And once you sand that down with some fine sandpaper, you'll never see it. All right, everything is dried and we're ready to sand. And I've been started already, as you can see, but sanding is a mess. And I really am gonna concentrate on these edges of where I feathered out. I want that to be flat to the drywall. Not gonna sand real heavily right in the middle because we don't wanna lower the middle, because we have kind of a mountain here where, you know, about a 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch rise in the center to the outside. So we wanna make sure we keep that nice and smooth. And just make sure everything's ready to paint. So we'll go ahead and get started here and make this look nice. Here's the other side of the room over here. Everything's sanded, and it turned out pretty good. We've got a real nice crisp corner all the way along there, and all the tape is covered pretty well. Everything's pretty smooth here, and it looks like we shouldn't see any tape lines there. So. All right, so we've got all of our primer and paint on here. So this is the wall that we've been kind of demonstrating the process, and as you can see, it looks pretty darn good. It's not perfect, but you can't see most of the tape lines, and everything went pretty well here. There are a few little issues. I can see we've got some paint run over here where we had a little bit of an edge, so maybe sanded too thin there. But those little things are gonna happen, especially when you're learning. Had some oopsies as well. A spot over here just did not turn out very good at all, and had a tape pop through over here, so this was a very bad job. You know, again, I don't do this very often, so we learn and we keep moving forward with it. But most of the other joints turned out pretty good, especially the one that, at least the one that I demonstrated on, turned out really well. So, but everything looks pretty good in here. We're starting to get the flooring put on and electrical finished up, so we'll have those videos coming out soon. So that's a basic take on how to drywall and mud and get all that completed. One of my least favorite things to do on all these projects is the drywalling process, and I think it's kind of intimidating to a lot of people. It is an art, and it does take time to really learn to do it well. But you're never going to learn to do it well if you don't try it. So I definitely would encourage you guys, if you have questions, throw them down below. And I know there's a lot of pros out there that have a lot of good tips with drywall that have done this more than I have. Please throw those down in the comments as well, as always, because everybody can read and learn from those. So throw that stuff down below. As always, guys, hit thumbs up on the video. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.